You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis show. And now let's go to the Bank of Ghana and make a detour also to the GCB Bank, because the GCB Bank is now bigger with UT and Capital Banks having been absorbed by the Ghana Commercial Bank. As you know, we woke up on, was it on Monday?
Yeah.
Right. To news early morning that the Bank of Ghana has ordered the closure of UT and Capital Banks, had withdrawn their licenses to operate. And shortly, we also heard that the Securities Exchange had also withdrawn its license as well, or frozen it, was it? And one issue after the other has come up as a result. Let's hear those who have been at the forefront of this issue speaking and giving reasons why the actions that we're taking were necessary.
So insolvent banks do not have 180 days. I think we need to make that clear. Secondly, we only have two insolvent banks in Ghana. This is UT Bank and Capital Bank. So this talk about the fact that they are not the only ones, it's really unfounded. These are the only insolvent banks that we have in the system, and those are the ones that we have resolved. The P&A transaction has distinct benefits. Customers will suffer no loss. The acquiring bank increases its market share, and then the productive assets are maintained. I think we should emphasize the point that no depositor will lose his or her funds, and all depositors will continue to do normal banking business with GCB Bank. Under the arrangement, GCB would acquire all deposits and some selected assets of UT Bank and Capital Bank. The premises of UT Bank and Capital Bank will be rebranded as branches of GCB Bank, and all customers can continue to do normal business at these branches. Similarly, all debtors should continue to make their loan repayments as legally scheduled. As you know, banks play a crucial role in financial intermediation for growth and development of the country. However, there are risks associated with performing this role, which should be managed effectively to avoid jeopardizing the stability of the financial sector. UT Bank and Capital Bank were requested to submit restructuring and capital restoration plans. However, the plans that were submitted by these banks were found to be unacceptable. A pro forma balance sheet of liabilities to be taken and assets to be purchased were prepared, and a pool of bidders was asked to express interest. GCB Bank was then selected among three others on the basis of purchase price, cost of funding, branches to be retained, staff to be employed, and the impact on the acquiring bank's capital adequacy ratio. Ladies and gentlemen, UT Bank and Capital Bank were heavily deficient in capital and liquidity, and their continuous operation could have jeopardized not only their depositors' funds, but also posed a threat to the financial system. It has therefore become necessary for us to revoke their licenses and approve this transaction to allow GCB, a large bank with the right balance sheet, to take over all the deposits and selected assets of the two banks.
The issue about jobs, which will inevitably go. We shall conduct a skills assessment. As part of the integration process, we need to know that we can bring everyone on board or we can't bring everyone on board. This is an expanded institution, and as we go through the integration, we shall know what jobs to close down and what jobs to retain. I intimated when I spoke about the revocation of the licenses of the two institutions that from that moment on, their employment with their previous employers ceased. All claims, therefore, will have to go to the receiver. We cannot speak to that. What we can speak to is the fact that they are working with us for the moment. They are new employees of our institution, and therefore we shall look to see if we can keep them or if we can't keep them. As to what happens in terms of the resolution of the contracts that we give them, it's another matter which we'll handle internally.
What we have done in the course of this exercise is to block directors' accounts, is to block related parties' accounts, is to block key management staff accounts. Now, the reason why we have done that temporarily, I must have put the word temporarily, is that we have to examine those accounts from, let's say, a period.
Okay.
And then try to find out, are there any unusual transactions? If the unusual transactions, then it must be investigated.
What do you mean by unusual transactions?
Let's say that you are a director, and we see from the account, the only money that comes into your account is basically director's fee. Okay, let's say, I don't know exactly how much they pay, but if it is 5,000 per sitting, and then I see all of a sudden movement from the same bank into your account of, let's say, 200,000. I want to know why. What happened?
Okay.
Right? Or I want to see a narration in your account. Loan to Director X. Was the procedure for approval followed? Does it have a board approval? Did it go through the risk management framework? Is it consistent with the act that gives you as to how much you can lend to a director?
Okay.
It is a related company. Does the director involved absented himself from the meeting? Or did he excuse himself? Or did he fully disclose that I am an interested party in this company?
Has this been done for the two banks?
No, that's what I'm saying.
That there's currently a freeze.
There's currently a freeze, and we are going on it. I mean, the team from Bank of Ghana is there with the Pricewaterhouse. We are looking at this thing because, you see, they are not things that you can block for a long time.
We are urging the government to, as a matter of urgency, institute a bipartisan probe into what occasioned the rise and fall of these two banks. We think that this situation needs to be investigated so that if it is true that actions or inactions by owners and managers of these banks actually resulted in the banks collapsing, I believe that the state will have to take action. We, the members of the minority of this parliament, as a matter of urgency, will be requesting through the Right Honourable Speaker that the Minister of Finance and the Governor of Bank of Ghana be invited to brief Parliament.
Right, so those we heard in those clips, Dr. Ernest Addison, who is the Governor of the Central Bank. We also had Ray Soa, who is the MD of GCB Bank, who spoke primarily about whether or not people will lose jobs or not. That's a reality that will surely have to be admitted. And then we also had Raymond Amanfo, who is in charge of banking supervision at the Bank of Ghana, speaking about, blocking accounts of some of the directors. It was a temporary action. We're told that some of those have been defrosing. And then you had, and he was speaking to Raymond Akwa on the Upfront. Is a new program here on Joy. It's very important and critical show. You should follow it. And also Ato Forsen, Kessel Ato Forsen, who is the minority spokesperson on the matters of finance. He's former deputy minister. We can now also listen to President Nana Akufo-Addo say something briefly about this situation.
The need to entrench reputation and credibility in the financial system is crucial. A weak banking system undermines growth. And on this basis, the current weaknesses in our banking sector need to be addressed forcefully to minimize any adverse financial consequences to unsuspecting savers and their spillover effects on the economy. My understanding is that a roadmap for addressing banking sector weaknesses is being implemented. I urge you, as the nation's central bank, to remain committed to the process and to address the challenges confronting the banking sector. This will not only guarantee financial stability, but also promote greater confidence in that sector. Your most recent measures in intervening decisively over the matters of UT Bank and Capital Bank demonstrate your preparedness to act in a manner worthy of a responsible central bank, of a praiseworthy regulator. I'm confident that you have the support of the nation.
MTN. Welcome to the new world.
Prostacure food supplement improves urine flow in men.
In the Star Eye Clinic, we say bye-bye to contact lenses and spectacles.
You're welcome back, and you just heard the President, Nana Akufo-Addo, speaking at a gathering of people in the banking industry and giving commendations to the Bank of Ghana for being proactive in the manner in which they have dealt with this issue, and hoping that the nation will back them so that we do not have a situation as happened in the DKM situations where we later had to blame the bank for not acting. Now, I start with you, Clara. When the Bank of Ghana issued the statement and says that these two banks virtually have become insolvent and that they have overexposed themselves in ways that was putting depositors at risk, and not only depositors at risk, also the banking industry or the financial industry, finance industry at a certain danger. How do you understand that as a teacher of tax law? How does that come to you?
When I heard the announcement, I didn't make a judgment one way or the other, precisely because the facts are insufficient to be able to judge one way or the other. Of course, normally for any Ghanaian, especially given our recent history of the DKM and then the other Ponzi scheme issue, as a normal Ghanaian, I was happy that at least if there was risk to depositors' funds, there was the regulator was proactive in trying to secure risk. But whether or not the regulator followed the laid down procedure and the laid down applicable rules and regulations, I couldn't tell that they had not, or they had, because the facts were not there to make a determination one way or the other. But with respect to securing depositors' deposits, yes, it's a good thing to always move to protect the industry and to also protect depositors' funds. I believe that if there is anything untoward, the companies that are affected have they know what to do. So until there is any information to the contrary, my reaction was that if the regulator has observed, of course would have been monitoring and supervising and therefore has a reason to act, I would give them the benefit of the doubt until there is reason to lift the doubt in that instance. So that was my first reaction. Of course, the other issue... They
issued a statement. And when you go through that statement, did you find a justification for revoking the licenses of these two banks to start with?
Yes.
And the Securities and Exchange Commission also suspending the license of UT Bank?
Yes, the new Banking Act provides circumstances under which the Bank of Ghana can revoke a license.
Educators.
Well, the circumstances are different. It provides, even the various procedures, they are so wide and they apply to different circumstances and different situations. I didn't have enough facts to determine which of the situations this applied to. But do they have the power to do that? Yes, they do. That's why I said until there are more facts, there are different scenarios under which they can revoke the license. So I didn't have enough facts to determine which of the scenarios that they used.
Okay.
But I wouldn't want to prejudice the situation as well. I would rather let the information trickle in to see, let it come from them that we used it under this particular scenario, and then we would see. Because apart from revoking the license, there's a procedure. One of them is that you would have tried to help the bank. You give them some time to solve the problems that they need to solve. You could also even appoint a person to help them resolve the issues, an expert in that area to help them resolve the issues. According to the statement, the Bank of Ghana indicated that it did all of this.
Right.
So from the face value, it looks like the Bank of Ghana complied with the law. My initial reaction and concern particularly is whether opportunity was given and even assistance in terms of capacity.
Okay.
Of course, because they are Ghanaian banks, I'm interested in Ghanaian businesses. I want Ghanaian businesses to grow. And I believe that when our businesses have problems, we should find a way of being able to assist. And I actually even believe that industry and government need to have a system where there could be capacity building for various businesses anytime they need it. So I was looking out for that. And the Bank of Ghana's statement says that they did this.
Right.
But even after that...
Their statement was not that long. If
okay.
I may share it with everybody else, then you continue.
Okay.
So this is, the Bank of Ghana has approved a purchase, an assumption transaction, a purchase and assumption transaction with GCB Bank Limited that transfers all deposits and selected assets of UT Bank Limited and Capital Bank Limited to GCB Bank Limited. The Bank of Ghana has revoked the licenses of UT Bank Limited and Capital Bank Limited. This action has become necessary due to severe impairment, and that's very critical, severe impairment of their capital. The remaining assets and liabilities will be realized and settled respectively through a receivership, and you would help us with that one too, through a receivership process to be undertaken by Messrs. Vish Ashagbo and Eric Nana Nipa of PricewaterhouseCoopers. The main offices and branches of UT Bank and Capital Bank will be under the control of GCB Bank and will be opened at 1 p.m. today. That was Monday, August 14. For normal business transactions, customers of UT Bank and Capital Bank are now customers of GCB Bank. Such an automatic process. All deposit customers will continue to have access to their funds. UT Bank and Capital Bank branches and ATMs will continue to operate as normal as GCB Bank branches and ATMs. All staff in the interim will become staff of GCB Bank, and GCB Bank will negotiate the terms of their contracts. GCB was selected among 3 others on the basis of purchase price, cost of funding, branches to be retained, staff to be employed, and impact on the acquiring bank's capital adequacy ratio. The Bank of Ghana assures the public that all customers can continue normal banking business at all UT Bank and Capital Bank facilities, which are now branches of GCB Bank. The approval by the Bank of Ghana of this transaction is to strengthen Ghana's banking sector, ensure financial stability, and protect depositors' funds. The Bank of Ghana reassures customers of UT Bank and Capital Bank that their money is safe and they can continue to do business at their respective branches, which are now the branches of the Bank of Ghana.
Yes. Now, with respect to the appointment of the receiver that you mentioned, for example,
right.
Of course, the law provides allows the Bank of Ghana, once the license is revoked, to appoint a receiver. So that is what the Bank of Ghana has done. And the purpose of the receiver basically is to sell and dispose of the assets, the remaining assets of the company, because from the purchase agreement would indicate what assets that the GCB is taking, what liabilities GCB is taking, and what they are not taking. So what they are not taking would fall within the domain of the receiver to now realize and then distribute. The reason about the impairment in the first place is that they are not able to meet their debt obligations as and when they arise. So of course, now what is going to happen is that the receiver will now sell off the assets, then pay off the taxes, then pay off creditors, any persons who owe who the company owes. And then if anything is left, the shareholders would be the last to get anything. Of course, I don't expect the shareholders to get anything, because if you are not able to pay your debts, it means that your debt obligations are more than your assets. So most likely some of your creditors might not even get anything. So I don't expect shareholders to get anything. But in the ranking, that is how it would go: the taxes, the creditors, and then the shareholders. One critical factor is the employees.
Right.
The problem is what happens. Usually from these type of arrangements, the agreement would provide for the...
You close from work, you go to sleep, wake up the next day, and you belong to another company. Exactly. How does that happen?
Well, under the laws, we've seen how that happens. But now it is not compulsory for an employee can decide that I don't want to work with.
Well, they
GCB.
want to work.
If you want to work, then you have to look at, I'm sure I haven't seen a copy of the purchase agreement, but the purchase agreement will contain the kinds of employees that they are going to assume. I can see from the news that they say they are going to do a skill set, because under these ones, it is not usually the case that they would have taken all of the employees.
Right.
So the employees that they are taking, it is now between those employees and GCB to negotiate the terms and conditions of their service. If, for example, they suffer some kind of lower conditions of service than they are used to, they could make a case for redundancy pay or what we call severance pay, because that an employee is entitled to that pay anytime there's a change in your conditions of service to your detriment. So if this change has resulted in their detriment, yes, under the purchase agreement.
Right, irrespective of the circumstances that this change occurs?
Yes.
This is not a normal circumstance.
Well, it is not, but the employee it's a statutory right.
They could have lost their jobs completely without getting a dime home.
They could have, but that is why they purchase it, because then it now comes on who bears liability. They have a right. Who to exercise that right over is the question. If they have the right to exercise it over GCB under the purchase agreement, then of course, they have somebody with deep pockets they can get something from. If it falls within the insolvent company, of course, you have a right, but if the company doesn't have money to satisfy you, it doesn't have money to satisfy you.
It's my attempt to render this, statement, severe capital impairment, is that it?
Yes.
Severe, due to severe impairment of their capital. Is my attempt to render it this way correct? I say that they have spent far beyond their means. Is that what has gotten them where they are?
I wouldn't say yes or no, but usually when this happens, the most important thing is that when your debt obligations are due, you are not able to meet them.
Right.
Now, whatever you did with the money that has landed you in this position is a different matter.
Okay.
But the fact remains that you are not able to pay your debts as and when they arise. It is possible that you spent out of your
or
means,
you have committed.
Exactly. Or that you probably didn't manage your assets well, or that you have given loans and you haven't been able to recover.
Right.
So the reasons where you find yourself might differ. But the most important thing is that where you find yourself is that you are not able to meet
We're
your debt
learning that
obligations.
they seem to have given hefty loans that they can't, take care of. They seem to have gotten into certain businesses, including the oil or the petrochemical industry, attempts into some manufacturing of sorts that they just don't have the capacity to meet these.
In fact, the loans usually the loans and recovery of loans is usually a topic close to my heart.
Right.
For another reason, which is that if you look at the history of Ghana, for example, we've always complained that the banks, right even before independence, we've always complained that the banks like to give capital to non-Ghanaians. But when Ghanaians come up for loans, the banks don't want to give loans to Ghanaians. The effect being that a lot of people, including young people, have bright ideas that if they had the funding, they would be able to make successful businesses, but they are not able to get the funding from the banks. So other people come to the shores of Ghana usually with nothing. You have other nationals who come to Ghana with nothing. They take a loan from their bank, and then within at least a matter of time, they become very successful businesses, and they pay back. And the role of banking generally is to be able to fund ideas. But Ghanaians are there, they are not able to get it. You talk to the banks first. One of the accusations was that it was racism. That these banks come, they don't respect Ghanaians, they don't want to give us loans. I talked to the banks and asked them, because yes, if you look at the statistics, it is a fact that banks are more likely to give loans to certain nationals than they would give to indigenous Ghanaians. But what is the reason they gave? Non-payment of loans. The reasons they gave wasn't raised, but they said the reason why they were reluctant to give loans to Ghanaians were that a lot of Ghanaians who took loans didn't pay back. And then you can trace it into our cultural issues. Sometimes
it's a bit surprising to me because I have come to know the banks practically chasing you to pick loans.
They chase other people. I know there's a certain category of people that they chase. Sometimes you don't even, they actually chase the ones who don't need a loan. There are sometimes that a bank would approach you. You are probably even, let's say you are buying a car, you write a check for them to cash the payment for the car. And your bank calls you to say that, oh, why are you paying for the car? We can give you a loan. You don't have to pay from your cash. Please take back your cash and let us give you a loan, and then you can pay for the car. You don't, they try to entice you not to pay. But you've given a check. But do you really need a loan? You don't. But there are people who have ideas, and they go to the same bank, and they want a loan, and the bank is not interested. Okay. So yes, the banks chase certain people for loans. But there are a lot of people out there who have business ideas who are not able to get funding from anywhere, including the banks. And one of the reasons is because of recovery. The banks are skeptical. And like I was tracing it to our culture, there are situations where people take loans, and then you get home. I don't know sometimes how we see the loan as if it's a grant rather than a loan. But then they go, instead of applying the loan to whatever they were going to use the loan for. Somebody is sick, then they dole out money from the loan.
Quickly explain this, and then I move on to George Lowe to get his understanding of what is going on. Where they said that the remaining assets and liabilities will be realized and settled respectively through a receivership process.
Yes.
What do they mean by that? They are not taking on everything. No,
they are not taking on everything. Because, like I said, some of them would have gone to under the purchase and agreement. But so what is left is what the receiver, now an independent party, would take those assets together, first take possession of the assets, and then including they have a lot of powers, basically all the powers that belong to the management of the companies and the directors of the companies.
Is it safe to say they would have taken or bought what is good about the banks that they say have become insolvent, and what is bad? They are leaving that to go into the receivership?
Not completely. They would have taken some of what is good and then some of what is bad. For example, the deposits. It's possible that maybe the banks wouldn't have been able to meet all of the deposit-taking obligations, but they've taken that. But it's a business, so you don't expect them to go for all that is bad and then a little of what is good. So I expect them to take a lot of what is good and then some of what is bad. Maybe they may have no need for some of the assets. So it is possible that they didn't take all of the assets. It's difficult to say without seeing a copy of the purchase agreement to see exactly what was taken and exactly what was left.
All right.
But the point is that the receiver takes all the powers of the management of the company, including directors and shareholders, takes possession of the assets, dispose of them, pay off the creditors, and then what is left, of course, pay their own fees. And then what is left, they give to shareholders.
Did you expect what we were told by the manager in charge of banking supervision, Raymond Amanfo, when he said that they are blocking some of the accounts of some of the directors? Did you expect that?
No.
And that they are going to go through that process to be sure that if you receive some money or some transaction has gone on within your account which is suspicious, they would take note of all of that for purposes of prosecution, perhaps?
Well, as for investigations, yes, they can investigate. But whether or not they should block their accounts, I don't think so. Of course, the directors have certain duties to the Bank of Ghana, including duties to report certain activities that go on. the Bank of Ghana has certain rights against directors that they can enforce against directors. And directors are subject to liabilities, including payment of penalties if they breach the duties that they owe, including the duty to report. However, I've always said that the fundamental basis of our jurisprudence is that you are innocent until proven guilty. I haven't read anywhere that the Bank of Ghana has made findings that the directors are in breach of their obligations. So in the absence of any finding of fact or any belief that they have breached any of their obligations.
We have heard that one of them has not reported on its financials for close to how many years? 5 years.
Is it the bank or the
bank?
Yes, the bank has not, but what did the Bank of Ghana do? Because like I just said, the directors owe an obligation to the Bank of Ghana to report. So when they did not report, what did the Bank of Ghana do? Did the Bank of Ghana take action? Or the Bank of Ghana just waited and then in the light of all this, there's a panic reaction? There is, yes, we want our regulator to do well, but it must be consistent and it must be regular, not anytime. It mustn't be panicky. So yes, they didn't do this. We don't know whether or not they reported. I haven't heard the Bank of Ghana say that they breached their reporting obligations. The bank may not have done this. Was the director aware? There's a procedure for the reporting. Did the director go without reporting, or is the Bank of Ghana making a specific categorical statement that A, B, C, D happened, and you, Director A, you breach your obligation A, B, C, D, and so therefore, this is the action I'm taking against you.
Okay.
But to just throw allegations and suspicions, and then based on your suspicions, proceed to act, I don't think it's proper.
Okay. Judge, well, the minority has issued a statement. It's calling for a bipartisan, I don't know why bipartisan, for what? I mean, does everything be put under the lens of parties? Political parties, so to speak. What's a bipartisan, investigation supposed to do?
Well, in Parliament, there is always the tendency to strive for a semblance of a bipartisan approach to everything that we do. And so it is not a call in the wrong direction at all. We do not want, if you left it to the discretion of anybody, and he decided that I was going to put together an ad hoc committee made up of one side of the political divide, it will send wrong signals to Ghana, Ghanaians generally that,
No, what is the politics about this that calls for this? You see, wait.
Yeah.
The regulators are doing their work. The central bank, the Securities and Exchange, they are all active, ensuring that they are working, and they say protecting depositors' interests and the financial industry.
But you see, the whole point the minority sought to make, all these bodies that we are talking about, the Bank of Ghana itself, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and all at the Ghana Stock Exchange and all others, did they act right? And I believe that my sister Clara talked about some of those, asked those relevant questions. And so for us to know whether they themselves did not do us in one way or the other, we cannot have they themselves investigating themselves. And Parliament has, the monies in this bank belongs to the people of Ghana. And therefore, parliamentarians who are their representatives has a right to say that, look, let's put together a bipartisan and let's investigate, let's get properly briefed. If for nothing at all, when you go back to your constituency and you need to explain at your clinics. Yesterday, for instance, the Volta region had a caucus.
No, what has this got to do with going to your constituency and explaining to anybody?
The money there belongs to the people of Ghana. They want to understand what went wrong. There are people who may want to take up and fight for their rights in one way or the other. I'm saying, and if you would have allowed me to go through, for instance, it is clear that the Bank of Ghana breached certain laws. The Securities and Exchange Law 2016, I think 929 or so, says in states that as part of the functions of the Securities, it says that they must approve every takeover. Did they approve it? Is there any evidence that
you mean there are no exceptions and there are no laws that supersede that provision?
Listen, that provision is clear, very clear. I'm
asking. You may know this, but you may not know the next other law which supersedes this.
I'm saying that this is a law we passed in 2016, and it says clearly that they must approve all these things. The question is, if they didn't, why? There's a relevant question that has been asked. if you have a bank on the stock market, we for 5 years have not submitted statement of accounts. Was the Bank of Ghana aware? What did they do within these 5 years? So we must, you see, there are so many questions to be asked. And therefore, I don't think that is wrong for anybody to say, look, let's find a bipartisan approach to answer these questions and convince ourselves that nothing untoward has happened. In actual fact, if all were smooth, the Bank of Ghana itself would not be talking about going after directors to see whether they did the right thing. But for me, thankfully, like everybody is saying, you will say that you are gratified that we are being told that deposits are safe. But that is not what it is. The laws were made to be obeyed so that we don't get to where we are. You see, we are looking at a thing maybe from the legal perspective alone, but from the social, look, how do you feel? Like you yourself pointed out, you wake up Monday morning, you iron your things, you wake up at 4:30, and you walk to your office, and a policeman tells you, hey, you can't enter. How do you feel? And that you are going to a bank, your wife is in hospital, they say buy a drug, you don't have money, you rush to the bank to take deposits to be able to buy drugs, and you are told you can't have access to your deposits.
Until 1 o'clock.
It doesn't matter.
You can fall on someone.
Please. I knew there were people and yet I saved in a bank. No, these things, you see, for me, the whole management...
What do you prefer? Is that what... Do you prefer that and waking up to go to your DKM and realizing there's nothing? Which one do you prefer?
You see, let's put these things in proper perspective. The point I'm trying to make is that the Bank of Ghana could have managed this thing in a more professional, in a more smooth manner. And that is all we should always be talking about, because this is not the first time that banks will be taken over. But I'm saying that let's use best practices. What stopped the Bank of Ghana from doing some consultation once they decided that, look, this is where we wanted to go? There were senior managers of the bank that you could call and say, look, henceforth from Monday, this is what is going to happen. What is going to happen is that let depositors know that, you know, we are doing a special exercise, and until 1 o'clock, the bank cannot work. So everybody is ready. Tell even employees whose jobs that day were not critical, say that maybe we are doing some exercise, and so Monday you are off.
The statement was published by 6 a.m.
Please, it doesn't...
Informing them that you can only have access at 1 p.m.
But you see, I mean, let's get... You see, these things can be done in a more transparent, in a smoother manner, and everybody would feel okay. Because you see, if you're allowing the Bank of Ghana to wake up in the morning and take these kind of decisions without recourse to the relevant laws of this country, it's worrying. And they are giving us the impression as though they acted swiftly. No, the signals have been there for how many months? Years. Years. And yet, what even worries me was that some of these banks were getting 7 awards, 8 awards at our banking awards, and we're clapping for them. It was giving some of us courage to even go and do more business with them. When the Bank of Ghana, which is supposed to be the regulator, knew that no, these people were in peril.
The Bank of Ghana does not give awards.
Please, I am saying that all this, because they supervise the banking industry, and so when you are giving awards that you know that is not merited, you should move in. Look,
the Bank of Ghana should go to the awarding
institution. Saying, yes, they should provide the basis.
And tell them that you cannot award this bank.
I am saying that Bank of Ghana should even put it in that he does not believe in some of the awards that were being given. Because you see, I'm saying that they were superintending the banking industry of this country. And anything that gave wrong signals, anything
Have you checked what the criteria for awarding the banks was?
Please, I am saying...
And whether or not it included that you are overexposed, or you have some financial impairment.
Listen, when you follow...
People are insisting now that you are offloading these customers onto GCB Bank. We are sure that the kind of service that people get at UT Bank and at Capital Bank, they will not get at GCB Bank.
That is another matter for another day.
So they can win an award there,
saying that,
irrespective of their situation.
Go and look at the plethora of awards that have been won. Some have won 5, some have won 6, and look at the categories. So let's not play, I know you are playing the devil's advocate, but I'm saying that things are wrong in this country, and we must begin. And I have even extended it to so many things that happen. Sometimes when you talk, people think you are playing politics, but I ask questions. Even our board structure of the Bank of Ghana today, vis-a-vis the things that are happening in the industry. Was the minister on top of his job when they were making recommendations for the composition of boards and other related matters?
What do you mean?
You see, for instance, I really didn't want to get there, but if you are pushing me, for instance.
I haven't pushed you, I just asked you a question.
And I'm saying that there are
something.
people on the Bank of Ghana board today who I believe that are in a conflict of interest position vis-a-vis what has transpired. Because you know that with the Capital Bank, ICGC is a shareholder.
ICGC?
Yes.
As in the church?
Go and check this thing. And then
it's a shareholder.
Otabil and Associate has shares in there.
How many shares?
It doesn't matter.
No, you're talking about it.
I am saying it doesn't matter.
Should be upfront with
no, the point is, do they have or do they not have? We should find out. Okay, so when you have the wife of the senior pastor of the church on the Bank of Ghana board, and today they are saying they are going to investigate these things, for me, there's a problem. And I'm saying that at the time, the Bank of Ghana...
Shouldn't that rather have been a reason for not touching that bank?
I am saying that if the Minister of Finance knew, because I don't believe that the governor of the Bank of Ghana woke up in the morning and decided I'm going to take over 2 banks. He had a supervising minister who was a minister and for whom he has called and spoken to maybe a month ahead of time. That these discussions were ongoing. You should have been advised as to who constitutes the board, even as we are moving into this direction.
So what are you saying?
I am saying
that the individual who is wife to a pastor of a church does not have the right as a citizen of Ghana to be appointed to a board of a bank if they are so qualified, simply because the church or the pastor of the church has shares in a bank that is in distress?
You see, it's only in this part of the world that we look at it from this perspective. But I'm saying in all other places, that wouldn't have happened. Clearly, you are putting the person in a conflict of interest, particularly with the circumstances which should be in the know to the minister who is making the recommendations for the appointments anyway. That is the point I'm trying to make. All the conflict of interest issues that we are flying around, doesn't it boil down to similar circumstances? So, look, for me, you see, as a state, we must move away from some of the things that we do. And I'm saying that let's go according to the lines of international best practices. I am saying that, look, to the extent...
You have just said international best practice. You have not referred to any best practice. You just said
I'm saying that
it's easy to say so.
It's a generic term.
No, but you should be able to go beyond that when you are applying it to specific situations.
On this program, you and I spoke about the guy who worked at Barclays, who became a deputy governor of the UK bank, and he had to resign his position simply by that. I mean, there are many of it that you can give. So let's not go there. I am saying that let's always give our people the feeling that we are acting in their best interest and that we are doing things that follow due process.
The minority's major concern, major concern was this, that it will be recalled that the NDC government introduced a number of structural measures that sought to strengthen the financial sector and to protect depositors. Notably, among them is the Ghana Deposit Protection Act.
Yes.
This act established the Deposit Protection Scheme, insurance, the Deposit Protection Fund, and Deposit Protection Corporation. The act seeks to protect depositors from potential losses resulting from the occurrence of an insured event. It is also to support the development of a safe, sound, efficient, and stable banking system in Ghana. We urge the Bank of Ghana to, as a matter of urgency, start implementing the provisions of this act without further delay. How can you say a regulator that has been swift in stopping what would have been a disadvantage to depositors is not rather, doing this that you are requiring of them? Then they say that we urge the Bank of Ghana to ensure that the acquiring bank, which is the largest indigenous bank with both public and private shareholders, is not overburdened unnecessarily with non-performing loans and impaired assets. We recall that the NDC government in recent past years took a deliberate policy action to pay the TOR debt owed to GCB, which helped to restore the bank's balance sheet to its current healthy status, and also not to interfere in GCB's operations. It is our hope that the past and future transactions involved in this indirect liquidation will not be clouded in another secrecy on grounds of quote-unquote market sensitivity. that GCB should not be overburdened. So what information do you have that suggests that those who took the decision at GCB that they can handle this situation are overburdening that bank to the disadvantage of their shareholders?
But you see, again, were they acting on behalf of their shareholders? Were the shareholders of GCB consulted in this matter? Obviously no, and the managing director confirmed it. He was saying that, oh, it's after the fact, that when they finish, they will go and brief the shareholders. My question is, so if you went into a shareholders meeting and they came out and said, no, we don't approve of these takeovers, then what happens? So I'm saying that when the minority raises these issues, it just raises issues that, look, let's not do this, we hope this doesn't happen, let's be more careful. For instance, you are talking about Swift takeover. What is Swift about the takeover? Is it because they sprang a surprise in a Rambo style on Ghanaians and you call it Swift? When they were in the know several months that this is where they wanted to go. I don't agree with this whole idea of they were Swift. I thought that they could have done this in a more humane and a more level-headed manner. Okay. It wasn't done. They just came rushed one morning, sprang a surprise on everybody. People could have died, you know. Because when you hear that a bank has been taken over, do you know what it means for some people? Some people have...
When that announcement comes with assurance that your money is safe,
why
would you die?
We've told DKM people that they'll get their money. There are many of them who still are not getting their money as we sit here today. So let's not, play with this kind of thing. I'm saying that that announcement could have sent somebody to their grave.
Okay, take some respite and let's hear from the Deputy Minister. I really hope that you guys can get to the very fine, matters regarding this takeover, rather than, get into the politics and turn everything else into politics, or partisan politics, so to speak.
Yes, I agree with you, Samson, and I can appreciate the difficulty that my colleague finds himself in, and I'll explain why I say that. And let me also quickly add that the question that you asked about the relevance of the statement from the minority calling for a bipartisan investigation, for me, is quite unnecessary. And you are right to be worried, but I can understand them. They want to jump on the back of the Bank of Ghana and share in the success and pretend that they are also part of the solution, whilst in fact they are the problem. And that is where we are today. So they are only seeking to be smart and, like I said, jump on the back of the Bank of Ghana. Because, I mean, the questions that have been agitating my mind are exactly what you spoke about. What is it now that the Parliament of Ghana wants to do, investigating how a statutory regulatory body does its job?
I have not spoken about anything. I have asked questions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I agree with you. I'm saying that the questions that were agitating your minds are agitating my mind and the mind of a lot of discerning Ghanaians. It was just an attempt at wanting to identify with success. And success, they say, has a lot of friends. And that is what they try to do. The fact of the matter is that this is a far better situation as compared to what occurred under the watch of the current minority and the then majority. When DKM happened and people lost several millions of cedis. And so for them, it is a manifestation of the contrast between competence and incompetence. And so they have to, and they are politicians, they have to do what they have to do to associate with the success. But they should hold their guns, remain calm, and watch competence work. Because this is how competence works. At the end of the day, all these legalities that are being talked about and the law of some you talked about, do we know all the laws, and are we sure that they are not covered and all that? We are not able to get any straight answer as of yet. Which matter for me, a simple walk into the offices of the Bank of Ghana to raise these queries will answer, instead of a bipartisan investigation to answer that question, whether the Exchanges Commission's input or permission has been sought for the takeover to have happened. That is why we want an inquiry. I think that people appreciate the fact that even though the banks that they were saving in had challenges, at the end of the day, a process has been put in place that they will not be shortchanged, that they can go after maybe some hours. People say your wife or your daughter is in the hospital and you have to wait between 1 and 6 a.m. and 1 o'clock to access the money. That is better than not being able to access your money at all. And I think that the Bank of Ghana on this instance must be commended. And if you listen to the narrative that was eloquently given by Madam here, Clara, you will notice that the Bank of Ghana did not just jump into what my brother describes as a Rambo-style takeover. There have been a series of action, including even appointing people to work with these banks, like the Bank of Ghana boss said. They have been invited to offer alternative. Plans were invited for them to assure the Bank of Ghana how they were going to recapitalize and all that, and that the plans that were submitted fell short of the expectations of the Bank of Ghana. So I am at a loss as to how we will be describing a process that started properly under a competent management of the economy, and that has led to a seamless takeover. Between 6 a.m. and 1 o'clock, you can now go into your bank and begin to withdraw money. To be described in such terms for me is quite unfortunate.
Would you have been okay if you had said it was sudden? At least to,
well, all takeovers
to
by their nature,
and the employers of
all
these employers of these banks.
All takeovers by their nature have to be sudden. You are not going to announce that, oh, in 2 weeks I am going to take over. People will even withdraw all their monies and all that.
So if you understand it as the Rambo style, as sudden, we can make progress.
Well, but that must be corrected so that the impression is not created as though it was a Rambo style. This is what standard practice, best practice is, my brother, you talked about. This is what best practice is, and that is what happens. You understand? So let us, Samson, you remember, and the question I ask is that, now who Kosam? Where are we where we are today? Today we are talking as though the new Bank of Ghana boss and board have been in existence for the past 5 years. No, they have not. We talked about the fact that people have not submitted their reports to the Bank of Ghana for the last 5 years. But there was a government that was superintending the affairs of state. There was a minister at the finance ministry. There was a Bank of Ghana boss, and there was a board. And the question has to be asked rightly. So what were people doing within the last 4 or 5 years when they were entrusted with management of the affairs of state? What were they doing? That question has to be answered by my brother. And I thought that this offered a fine opportunity for us to get some of those answers. You remember Dr. Baumia in his famous lecture, The State of the Ghanaian Economy, a foundation of concrete or straw, talked about how some banks were in serious distress and that if care was not taken, some of these banks were going to collapse. He was ridiculed. But today, the chicken, they say, have come home to roost. And Dr. Baumia rightly said that the capital adequacy ratios of some of the banks were terrible. Some were below even 10%. You see, my view, in the simple mind's mind, Madam Clara talked about a lot of reasons why banks can be in the situation for a takeover. But one of the major ones was bad loans. People were just not able to pay the loans they took from the Bank of Ghana. And it is not because Ghanaians by their nature are reckless people, and when we borrow money, we don't want to do the things that we want to do with the money and all that. Yes, of course, there are some, we can talk about those. There's some amount of problems about how we manage ourselves as a people. But I am saying to you that it cannot be said that a foreigner who comes to borrow money in Ghana, by their DNA or by where they come from, they are better people than the people of Ghana. The point is that, and again, I even have met foreigners who even for the past 4 or 5 years have been unable to pay their loans. Some foreigners have had to close down shops from Ghana businesses and leave the shores of Ghana. The economy was just being managed in a terrible manner. And if you describe this as incompetent, offense was taken. But that was the situation. People were just not able to pay their loans because the economy was frustrating everybody. We can talk about the rates of interest? How much were people paying on the loans that they took? If the interest rates come down, people get respite and they are able to pay their loans. You, Samson, talked about the banks going after people to take loans. Yes, we have had such situations in the bank. Even when I was just a young man trying to survive on a small... Yes, yeah, well, a younger man. Now, yes, I am still a young man. But when I was even a younger man, trying to manage my small advertising business at the time, I still got people approach me to take loans. It was because the environment at the time was different. I can assure you, in contemporary times, between 2015, 2014, 2015, 2016, the situation had changed. Banks started denying people loans. So it is always a question of how well is a government managing an economy. And that impacts on people's abilities to pay on some of these loans that they get. And that is where we are we are today. In May of 2015, non-performing loans was at 11.2% by figures from the Bank of Ghana. And Dr. Bawumia talked about this when he delivered the lecture. Just a year after, in May 2016, it had jumped from 11.2 to almost 20%. The non-performance loans had jumped from 11.2% to almost 20%. People were not...
Bawumia actually spoke about banks that were on the verge of collapse.
Yes. And you see all the figures for Dr. Bawumia, who was in opposition, to have been able to see the picture. He was not working in the Bank of Ghana at the time. He was not in government. He was not Minister of Finance. He was not Vice President. But he could see this and speak about it. And the government at the time came out to rubbish this, okay, which clearly meant to you that they did not even know that we had a problem.
From what we are learning from the Bank of Ghana so far, it's not a question of the management of the economy that has brought these banks into distress. It is rather the management of these banks. Is that not the case?
Not necessarily. The management of the banks have been called into question, but the ability of people to repay their loans is major and critical, and that has been also communicated. So it is not just a question of management of the banks. But I am sad. See, I was looking up to some of these Ghanaian-owned banks as shining examples. And maybe it is to that extent that I am thinking, could we not have organized the bailout? But of course, the argument about a bailout, for me, was defeated by the management practices of the managers of the bank. So yes, because they are Ghanaian, and even if they are mismanaging the corporate governance of their banks, were we going to continue to give them money?
Well, by the minority's interpretation, this is almost like a bailout. Because as far as they are concerned, you are giving to a state, a bank with significant state interest. You know, the difficulties of banks that you may have some sympathies for and will not want to see them collapse. So as far as they are concerned, if you like it, I mean, loosely put, this is a bailout for them. And it's a bailout that it's seeking to protect certain interests that may have some connections to or affiliations to the government.
No. Well, bailouts by their nature for me are not wrong. But I'm saying that it's always about how you do things. Had it not been the case that the management practices and the management culture that exists in these banks had been called into question, I would have even advocated a different form of bailout where the UT Bank and the capital banks would have been assisted to stand on their own still. But as it is now, the management culture and practices had been called into question. So to subsume them under GCB, that has clearly better management practices and the deep pockets to take on both the assets and liabilities of these two struggling banks, for me, was a smart move. Instead of wanting to bail them out in their current and present manner, in which people argue that their management was questionable.
Please don't forget that they are not taking all the assets and liabilities.
Yes.
And what is going into receivership, we may have to wait and see what happens later. Because in the receivership process, you may not know what will be distributed to depositors.
Yes.
And you see the process that they go through, it looks like it might take the same trend as you have found in the DKM situation, where depending on how much you have in the bank, you receive a certain amount, because at a certain point they don't have all the money to give you. So let's see how it goes.
Well, but
yes,
if I can
Doc,
just conclude
on
the fact that, just 1 second, I am excited that the Minister of Labour, as a matter of initiative on government's part, without any prompting, has taken steps together with the TUC to meet the GCB, the new owners of UT and Capital, to have discussions about the fate of the workers of the former banks.
Right.
And for me, this is reassuring. And this is what responsible governments must learn to do.
Great. Dr. Drew, the aspect of the fate of the workers is such a very serious concern. Now we know that from the assurances from the Bank of Ghana and the GCB itself, the new owner, depositors' funds are safe. But the workers, they are going to renegotiate their contracts. They are going to do some assessment of skills, and we know that a good number will go.
No,
how should that be managed?
Thanks, Samson. And if you permit me, before I get to your main question about the workers' fate, I think it's important for us to look at this event as not only in terms of responding to the crisis, but also lessons learned for our governance arrangement in the financial or the banking sector. What has happened, I suspect, is probably not the first time that has happened in this country. I suspect that some banks have collapsed in the past before. I also believe that in addition to the banking collapse, we have also seen low levels, microfinance, no savings and loans like ATM, all of these things collapsing, and the fate of depositors and maybe workers as well. But
some
I think,
have committed suicide.
Well, yeah. And so what has happened with UT and Capital Bank raises for me three fundamental issues. First of all, it has put at the center stage, and that's what we are discussing here, the effectiveness of our regulatory institutions. We are beginning to interrogate the actions and inactions of the Bank of Ghana, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and all of those things. It's a good thing. I'm not wishing that such events do happen, but when they do happen, they provide the opportunity for us to learn from what we've put in place, the mechanisms we've put in place, and how these mechanisms are working. Secondly, I think it also raises fundamental questions about laws and regulations that our parliament put in place to regulate some of these things, with anticipating that there might be issues like that, and how do you deal with that? And then thirdly, I think as Clara said, and what Honorable Judge Lowe also alluded to in some of his comments, is how do we understand the management of the corporate sector in terms of corporate governance issues? And if you put all these three together, I believe that as much as this is a legal or financial or economic issue, it's also a matter of governance. And that is why I don't really see anything wrong with the call by the minority for a bipartisan probe. Indeed, the Parliament of Ghana as an institution representing the interest of citizens. And this is the same parliament that enacted these laws, and this same parliament that these regulatory institutions are accountable to. I think the Parliament of Ghana has every right to look into this matter if they so wish. Except that sometimes I'm a bit worried if we could even have a genuine bipartisan approach to some of these things. Already, the tone from the two main parties have become a partisan tone. And so if we extend that partisan commentary outside to Parliament, can we genuinely have a bipartisan approach to some of these issues? Let's remind ourselves, in recent past, in even the US, if you want to cite example from US, the Lehman Brothers, the Enron issues, the US Congress took interest in that. They investigated these matters. You investigate to learn lessons, whether the laws that you have put in place are adequate enough. What has been the actions and inactions of the regulatory institutions with respect to these issues? Can we strengthen the institutions? Can we empower them more? Can we refine the laws that we've put in place so to deal with some of these issues that may come? Because you cannot anticipate all problems. So when issues like this come, it's a matter of interest for the Parliament of Ghana, the lawmaking body, the representatives of the people, who are expected to have the national interest at heart and are expected to demand accountability and responsiveness from these governance or regulatory institutions. So I think that we should not just condemn the minority call, except that if we want to do, I hardly see a bipartisan effort by Ghana's parliament. It only happens when, you know, it's sort of...
the monies in these banks are monies belonging to individual Ghanaians. It's not money belonging to Ghana. It's not money belonging to the state. What's Parliament got to do with it?
Individual Ghanaians are represented by members of Parliament. So as much as the monies are private monies, there is a locus. There's a relationship between...
Parliament should be getting into people's private business all over the place.
Parliament enacted these laws that regulate Bank of Ghana. Parliament enacted these laws that set up security and exchange commissions. And these laws that were passed, for instance, requested banks to provide reports to Bank of Ghana. And if these reports are not going in, you are telling me that Parliament has no right to question why the regulatory institutions failed to demand accountability from these banks? I don't think so. And indeed, the Bank of Ghana itself is accountable to Parliament of Ghana. And I think that the Parliament should question why this, and mind you, Samson, the warning signs were there. We're talking about 3 years, 4 years ago, I read about Kwesi Pratt's memo that he intercepted.
That's about Capital Bank.
Yeah, yes. There have been a lot of studies, research work that scholars from University of Ghana have done about all of these things.
And in Kwesi Pratt's publication, which got him his paper sued, he talks about having intercepted this, warning notice, so to speak, that had come from, the gentleman who is now the head of, or the MD for ADB.
Yes.
And he was with Capital Bank at the time as a shareholder as well. And he had written to warn that if certain things were not, revised or changed, they would get to this situation. And here they are.
So so again, that's why it raised those questions. What did the regulatory institution do about this? So again, we also need to even interrogate the process. Clara, I mean, I've gotten myself educated because I don't study this, the banking sector, I don't follow that area. In terms of the process, where shareholders' mandates required before GCB takeover. Again, what was the process of, in terms of procurement? Was it open to other banks to show interest? So there are questions that we need to look at.
Is it that we are not paying attention, or we are not satisfied with the explanations? Because the Bank of Ghana said, and I deliberately started with Clara, so that she comes with that perspective of a consummate professional in the area, then it might seek to inform what someone else may not know on this platform as they continue. So if the Bank of Ghana says this was a highly confidential process, so people came in, sort of pleased bids. You're talking about 3 different entities. And in the end, it is Commercial Bank, GCB, that won. Are we not satisfied with that, or that they have not told us? They have told us.
No, they have, but that is the one side from the institution. And that same institution is also accountable to another institution. And I think, this is a major scandal or major event, let me withdraw scandal, event that has happened to this nation. We need to learn from that. How do we prevent? In fact, there are rumors that there may be more banks, but the Bank of Ghana says there are not, there are only 2 banks. How are we sure about that? But even, let's take that, these are the only 2 banks. But how do we move forward as a nation? How do we ensure that the DKMs, the capital banks, the UT banks do not come to hunt us again? Maybe if we don't learn from that, tomorrow, GCB may not, or we may not be able to take the deposit, and maybe the next time might be more bigger debt that we may not be able to handle. So I think that as much as it's a legal or financial issue, it's still also a governance problem. We need to even question the corporate governance structures that we have in this country. How are we managing our institutions?
All right,
but let me just make one point on the labor.
Shortly.
Your fundamental questions on the labor issues. Right. I think, first of all, I think it's a good step that the Ministry of Employment being proactive to sort of look into this matter. One of the things that I got worried about this whole thing about inconsistency in messaging. I think the first message that came suggested that everybody there won't be any casualties, right? And then subsequently there was another one that sort of hinted that we're going to look at these things. And these are some of the inconsistency in messaging and communication.
You know that at minimum a quarter will go.
Well, yeah. So, but I think that, and I think I want to refer to a point that Clara said earlier on. I do think when situations like this do happen, there will certainly be casualties. And I think one sector that is likely to affect is the labor, because the GC, the new managers, have their own corporate ways of doing things. Right. They probably want to do less stuff for more, and we'll say that we have too many staff done. So I think we should expect it, but the most important thing is that we have to make sure that those that will be affected are not shortchanged. I think certain processes and certain benefits or severance or something like that, so that even as they go home, they go home with something.
Okay, thank you. And some messages that say that this was a purchase and assumption transaction and not a takeover. So if it were a takeover, they take everything, but they are selected items that they take and leave the rest to the receiver. And that is what is going on. That one is from George. And then Malik, he says that one of the key functions of the Bank of Ghana is snap checking, that they have the right to swoop on your premises at any time to cross-check your books. So it is not out of place what they have done to UT and Capital Bank, especially when they have information that something fishy is going on. Also, a banking expert at one of the respected managers says that, I'm not too sure he wants me to say who he is. He says that customers' deposits in a bank do not belong to the people of Ghana. Do not belong to the people of Ghana, but rather to some people of Ghana. Money in the government treasury belongs to the people of Ghana. Parliament, therefore, has no business setting up a bipartisan committee to investigate what does not concern them, i.e. customers' deposit in a certain commercial bank. And what has also happened now is that it's gone into yet another commercial bank. Yes, Clara.
Yeah, just briefly on the issue of the takeover and the shareholder concerns. And I think I want to situate it within our law. We have the normal takeover, and then of course the relevant paperwork is done, and then the Bank of Ghana will approve or disapprove of that takeover. But there's also the possibility, in case of distressed banks, for them to go into official administration. When they go into official administration, it is the Bank of Ghana in the first place that appoints such an administrator. And then such an administrator would work with the rules and regulations of the Bank of Ghana. And such an administrator has the power to sell either in whole or in part, to transfer the assets of the distressed bank in whole or in part. So in the absence of facts, like I have said earlier on, I cannot say that the Bank of Ghana has done something wrong or has not done something wrong. But there is the possibility in our law for the purchase and assumption agreement type of transfer, as has happened, to happen. But like I said, there are procedures to follow when triggering that option. Whether or not the procedures have been followed, I am not in a position to say because I don't have the facts.
You spoke about the workers too. And like Doc says, those who will not get the opportunity to continue in GCB, will they have
the Labour Commission has to be involved in this. In fact, I think the requirement is that once the signs were clear, the Labour Commission should have been involved at least 3 months prior to this. At least 3 months prior to this, the Labour Commission should have been brought into all of this to sort out the employee bits. But I think it's still not too late. The Labour Commission
George is indicating that these are some of the questions they are raising about the compliance processes towards the, purchase and assumption.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting.
And and secondly, the other point, I didn't finish my point about the loan recovery and the Ghanaian issue. If I don't finish it, it might end up not be looking misleading. Now, the issue is that I don't think we can run away from the fact of whether or not banks give loans to Ghanaians. Banks have given reasons why they sometimes are reluctant to give loans, even though that is their business. Their business is to give out money and then get interest on the money. So we should be interested, and one of the issues here is recovery of loans. We should be interested in finding out whether it is a fact that when loans are given, they are not recovered. If that is a fact, we mustn't leave it there and just say that, well, we give defenses or explanations here or there, but we should be able to find out the reasons why the persons who have taken the loans are unable to pay back the loans.
Right.
And if the reasons are, I think the reasons are issues we can help. So both the banks and government should have, in case sometimes, capacity building. Some of the businesses that may need capacity building.
Okay. You know
so
what?
we should have a system.
We'll return to do a wrap on this issue, on some of the nice points, not the political points. And this one for George Lowe is coming from Kwame Sapong Esiedu. He says, can you kindly remind George Lowe that the central bank, under whose watch the lack of supervisory input may have occurred, had most of its prime officers appointed by a president he glorifies. If he thinks they were a failure, then he should take a big look into the mirror. The current central bank, in my view, has been swift and prudent in preventing a near banking catastrophe. Sometimes supposed institutional failures should not be used as an avenue for political masturbation and premature orgasmic rhetoric. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back.
Very interesting.
Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. Now, let me go to some of your messages. Musa Abato in Kumasi says, I support the investigations into the Capital and UT banks, but which court gave Bank of Ghana the right to freeze the director's account? No announcement at all. All of a sudden, GCB has taken control of the two banks and the shareholders were not aware. Okay, so there are certain things that happen. If freezing accounts too, you may not need a court order to start with. You can freeze for a certain period, normally for about 7 days to start with, after which you can now go to court for the court to give you the power to continue to freeze it. Kofi Atta in Kenya says that, in UK says that Mr. George Lowe is struggling to find fault with Bank of Ghana, when in reality any failure of regulations by Bank of Ghana happened under the watch of NDC and not the NPP government. Kweku Owusu Mensah in Germany says that the minority knew there was a law that controls and protects depositors. What happened to DKM during their regime? Ibrahim Kopa in Tamale says that the decision for the government of Ghana to take over Capital Bank and UT Bank demonstrate how the government cares about the ordinary citizens. Michael Amening in the UK says that though the liquidation of UT and Capital Banks is a worrying and unfortunate situation, the minority should spare our ears with their petty politics, because it's their 8 years of incompetence and reckless management of the economy that has necessitated the insolvency of these two banks. Akwesi Obing Ejusu Bisiase says that I commend Bank of Ghana for letting GCB Bank take over the UT and Capital Banks. This has saved a lot of problems that would have arisen between the depositors and the banks involved. Right. Now, there are, and I start with Doc here, there are questions that are coming up, and people are sending them here. I'm just going to relay them to you. There's a certain concentration that on this platform we will not probably encourage. And not necessarily to bring it up, but about the personalities and individuals and how these people are taking them on. But this one has to do with the question about whether or not you think that Dumso had a role to play in people defaulting in repaying their loans, which may have accounted for this situation for these banks, partly perhaps.
Well, first of all, I think it will be very difficult to stick your neck out on that, because first, we don't even know the nature of debt that these banks faced.
Right.
So you can't really, on the face of it, attribute the insolvency on the part of the banks on Dumso. There could be several reasons, including that.
Is there any one of you who think that could be one of the reasons?
Well, I do.
You do?
I do. I clearly agree with His Excellency the President when he even proceeded and quoted ISA and put a cost to Dumso. Dumso has affected businesses and affected people's capacity to pay loans, and it is one of the reasons. So we do not need to know the individuals who have defaulted.
You won't wait for the Bank of Ghana to come and say it's one of the reasons.
No, I'm saying to you that something, you don't need to know the individuals who have defaulted. You don't need to know even the quantum. For me, it is a given. It is a matter of common knowledge that Dumso nearly devastated this country, and it cannot be one. It cannot be that it is not one of the reasons. It is.
Okay.
I think we have to be very careful in doing some of this analysis. Yes, we all do agree that Dumso had a negative effect on the growth of the economy generally. But if we don't have the information, it's very difficult for you to just categorically link what has happened to these two banks to Dumso. It could even be a simple management and decision-making processes with respect to the banks. It could be that loans were offered without due diligence in terms of how these borrowers were going to pay. It could also be that they probably invested wrongly. So I think we need to be very careful, but we cannot run away generally that Dumso had a broad
brief
effect
to end this round on this. And I come to you, Clara. The NPRA, the National Pensions Regulatory Authority, had cause to also assure trustees who had appointed UT Bank as their custodian that their pensions funds will not be affected by the takeover. Now, interestingly, UT's other holdings, is a major, the other subsidiaries, are they subsidiaries? Really? Yeah. Had also come to issue a statement to suggest that people should not be worried. It is the bank that is affected and not the others. Some say we should take that with a pinch of salt. Should we? Are they not separate legal entities? Why should we?
Oh no, they are separate legal entities, all right. But when these things arise, it's not merely legalities that people are looking for. There's more to it. You, as a business person, you are going to consider a lot more issues rather than just separate legal personalities. Because like the issues, I still say I'm handicapped because of the facts. We don't really know what happened. So are there issues of management? As for the assurance that the instruments that trustees may have invested in, trustees shouldn't be worried. It's good, and it should serve as some comfort to trustees and all of that. But the relationship with the other UT entities, yes, they are separate legal entities, but I think they also need to demonstrate themselves and give a lot of comfort to the people. But I don't think just raising the separate legal entity principle is going to calm nerves. So yes, there is work to do. Yes, they are into separate businesses, but the regulators in those industries too have to give assurances that in this particular industry, we have done the work and everything is above board. So we get back to the regulators. The regulators giving some assurance.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing you say, you are not saying that this will affect those other businesses.
No, I'm not saying that it will affect those.
Because that's the assurance they are giving to the public.
No, I'm not saying this. There's no reason to believe that this will affect the other businesses.
Okay.
How those businesses are run is completely different from how this business was run.
Okay. Yes. And what would you say finally?
Finally, like I say, for me, what is important really, because like I keep saying that it is at the heart of is opportunity for the Ghanaian youth to fund their ideas. We need a strong banking industry. But like I have said, apart from that, we just can't run away from the recovery, the non-recovery of loan system. So we do have to find a permanent solution to that. And I think the permanent solution ought to include capacity building for people, especially those who come for loans for their businesses. We need to show some interest and some leadership so that the economy will bloom. I believe that Ghanaians generally are very entrepreneurial. A lot of Ghanaians are hardworking. And given the right environment, Ghanaians are going to make this economy boom, and they are going to make a lot of success. The banking industry is key to that. So we must find ways of addressing some of the challenges, including the recovery or non-recovery of loans in the situation.
Yes, there are those who say there are just too many banks in Ghana, even compared to Nigeria, which has a bigger economy, right? I mean, they are heading to, now people even dispute the 150 population that they claim to have. That is more than that. And you have Ghana, which is just like Lagos, or Lagos even is more populated than Ghana. And we have almost equal the number of banks that they have in Nigeria. They had a similar situation which led to shrinking of the banks and mergers and all of that. Should we look forward to having, fewer banks in Ghana too?
No. I disagree robustly to that school of thought. I think that we need even more banks in this country. We have a huge unbanked sector, and we need it, both for capital mobilization so that the youth of this country can put the brilliant ideas up our heads into action, and that can bear fruits. So we do need the banks. And again, something, like I said, there's a huge potential, huge unbanked sector. Now people are even resorting to the mobile banking sector, the mobile money transfer. If you look at the volume of transaction that happens on those platforms, you will know that there is potential here. Banks, by their nature, also consolidate resources which can then be made available for individuals who need them. And again,
groups are metamorphosing into banks. Is that how it should be?
Well, no. Then we are talking now about regulation and what standards are set.
Okay.
So that is why the regulator has to be up and doing.
Right.
We can talk about the requirements that one needs to meet to be able to get registered and certification to become a bank.
Okay.
And what regulatory framework is there to ensure that once registered, you continue to operate within the confines and dictates of the law, so that such situations like the UT
Thank you, George.
and capital
What would be your
prevented.
final comments on
well,
this?
let me just make brief comments on that. You see, I agree with Doc when he says that, look, if you do an analysis of the nature of debt, then you can be informed as to whether Dumso had a role to play, didn't have a role to play. We all agree, and I will be the first to admit. I mean, there's no need hiding the fact that when we had Dumso, there were businesses that were affected in terms of performance and everything. So really, it's not like reinventing the wheel. We must pick the way it is. But to make it look like possibly a colossal chunk of that was a result, I think that it's neither here nor there, because we don't have the full facts. Having said that, you see, the nature of even the debt, and the things that we do, I agree with Clara when she says that, look, the banks themselves are not being regulated properly. And that when it comes to regulation, there are things that the Bank of Ghana must whip banks into line to do. They are interested in coming to you and I, who do not necessarily need loans, to take loans because they think that they can bring 40% and spread it over a year and they can recover. There are young people who need loans, small loans. They are never given the opportunity.
Okay.
And there are many other things that are happening within the banking sector. Look, recently, the threshold for the what is it called, had been reduced by 300 percentage points. Am I right? Yes, had been reduced by the PMC has reduced interest by 300%. Ask yourself whether it has reflected in loans and percentage that banks are lending. No, and it's a regulatory problem, because once that is set, the expectation is that it must trickle down. But nobody's watching and nobody's talking about it. And then let me also make this point that, look, Let's be very careful in this country. And for me and my brother Pius, we should all be advised that when these things happen, our ideas that we espouse should point to a certain direction that will salvage our economy. Because you see, when I sit back and I hear somebody say, oh, Mr. Low, your time, and then this one says, your time, I laugh. Because we are paying and bearing the blunt, the ordinary Ghanaian. There are people working in the Bank of Ghana for 40 years, for 30 years. They've risen to directorships. They are the ones making primary decisions as to what to do. They are the ones supervising the banks. They are the ones going around the banks, looking at their work, their scheme of work, looking at their processes, looking at their management style. They are the ones responsible for telling the minister or the governor that, look, this bank has been there. This is the report. It's not good. If they don't live up to expectation, you cannot get a functional governor or the functional president. So I disagree with my friend when he talks about you are in government and incompetence. Look, these things, the banking sector is for all of us. So we must all be guided. We should stop this issue of it was within this. Yes, but if the officials were up and doing, today we have them on TV espousing this, are doing this. What investigation couldn't they have done before? And do they do it and put a report in the it's possible even that the Minister of Finance will not even know that for so many months that the bank hasn't brought their report because it's their responsibility.
Thank you
so
very much.
So let's learn those things and stop playing the politics.
Thank you very much.
Simplicity.
Okay, thank you very much. Now